What's up, Zach here, and welcome to the Way of Wade 8083 Ultra review, or otherwise known as the review where you get to watch me try to open carbon fiber with a box cutter for 35 minutes. Here we go. And thanks to Way of Wade for sending me a pair of the 8083 Ultras to check out. However, as always, all opinions on these videos are still completely my own. Let's get into them. Now, starting off in the uppers, the 8083 Ultra is actually quite a bit of a departure from the 8082 Ultra, the V2, the more recent one that's come out. It mainly has to do with, number one, the containment that just the material in the upper provides, but also where they put the most plastic versus carbon fiber. Now, the main body of the uppers of the 8083 Ultra is more of a melded and braided TPU. So you can see where they've braided the TPU under the microscope, but then they've also kind of like half melted it together. So it ends up becoming one kind of giant slab of upper material, which gives it quite a bit more containment, like outsized containment for what the shoe is. Now, there also is a downside to that in that, the shoe is pretty low in the forefoot. So in terms of, high, medium, or low arch foot, we'll talk about that in the fit section, but that really is going to start to categorize who's going to be, liking this fit and who isn't. Now, if you look at the upper durability test, 10 seconds high grit sandpaper on that melted upper, the burr just barely makes any sort of impression on it. This is a super strong upper. In terms of dragging or sliding on an outdoor court, even really gritty, this is gonna be a lot better than most like super maximalist shoes. That was really nice to see. Now, when you get into the lace line of these, it is an external lace eyelet system, but it's one of those really like tightly integrated ones. So you do get a very good lockdown on these, especially because, like I said, the uppers are so intimately contacting the dorsum or the top of your foot. Now, the tongue is pretty thin. There is a decent bit of padding underneath of there, but all in all, it is a little bit more of a more minimalist tongue considering, like I said, how low the uppers are. Now, as you move back into, or I should say back and inferior on the uppers, number one, the lateral flange is made mostly of material plastic in the uppers. So there is a lot of like outsole rubber that comes up with it too. It's almost like a rolled rubber experience that goes right into the lateral flange. And then that is backed up with carbon fiber on the lateral side of the shoe, not like on the 8082 Ultra V2, which was just straight posterior. So you really see the shoe is really meant more for containing laterally versus on the twos, where this was mainly a stabilizer, both medial and lateral. So just a little bit different, a little bit less carbon fiber, but in more of a strategic location. Now, if you look at these things on the breathability test, they did heat up 131.2 degrees, then cool down another 73.7 degrees. Now, these were incredibly breathable. Like when I had the heat gun on there, the heat was just blowing out the uppers. You could feel it everywhere, but because it is an exposed midsole, it is a drop-in, that midsole will hold on to some heat. I'd say if you wear a thin pair of socks or wear two thin pairs of socks, you will get a really nice efficient air exchange through there, and you will mitigate that a lot if you're wearing a thicker pair of socks. Number one, a little bit issues with fit, but number two, you're gonna start to smash down on that drop-in, and that's when the shoe's gonna start to heat up. But getting into the midsole teardown, I guess you can argue I don't necessarily have to tear these down, but it is nice to see how actually thick the carbon fiber is and if there's anything special hiding in the drop-in. The interesting thing about the drop-in on the 8083 Ultra is they put so much more plastic in the forefoot, right? You get it into the arch, which is nice for a little bit of arch support, then it goes all the way up here into the entire pad or the entire metatarsal and toe area into the forefoot. Definitely gives it a little bit more, some kickback, and a little more of a diving board effect versus some other drop-in shoes. Like we always say, with drop-ins, it's hard to get a real launch out of these. With the 8083 Ultras, a little bit of a different experience we'll talk about when we get to the bounce height and playability section. But then underneath of it was the more interesting part. Now they claim is a supercritical foam strobe board. Now, supercritical foam means that while you're foaming it, you can inject another substance like nitrogen or CO2. Probably with this, it'd be nitrogen. But then underneath of that is the real interesting part. It's like this rubberized TPU, I'm not so sure, layer, maybe a combination of both, and it's somewhat clear. It looks a little hazy. And that's what encapsulates the carbon fiber underneath of that. And then underneath of that is the rubber portion of it. So you're actually getting this little almost like shock absorber layer underneath of the supercritical foam strobe boards. There's actually a lot of material between you and the outsole of the shoe. And I found that really interesting because number one, the carbon fiber on this is very, very thin. I was able to get through this a lot quicker than I thought I was going to when I did the intro of this video. But it's just, there's so many layers in between. Plus, I think they may have substituted a little bit of thickness of the carbon fiber for the plastic here in the drop-in to give a little bit more of a bounce. Now, if you look at the bounce height test on these, 40.5 centimeters in the heel and then 40 centimeters in the forefoot. Remember, this is a whole bed of boom here in the drop-in, so there is, you know, a lot of air tension in there. But I think also with the supercritical foaming underneath of that for the strobo board, with that little piece of like TPU rubberized material underneath of that, plus the rubber, you know, this is just a shoe that has a lot of bounce in it, unlike some other drop-ins we have seen. It's just a little bit of a different experience. How it affects the playability though is a little bit interesting, which like I said, we'll get to in a little bit. Now getting into the outsole tread, which is my favorite part of most Wade shoes. These are really no exception to that. It is mostly a wave rippling pattern coming all the way down the shoe. You have some really tight waving, a little bit more of a pattern here right under the ball of the foot for a little bit more pivoting power. I actually found that this needed much more warming to get, like maybe like 5-10 minutes of warming actually on this, versus some others where it's a little bit of a wider flowering pattern on some of the 808 shoes, which required 0 rubber warming. Definitely do a pre-game warm up on these before you start to really trust the traction. Now on slick, gritty, no matter what kind of outdoor courts, these will grip fine. And if you look at the outsole durability test on these, 10 seconds highest grit sandpaper, not even a millimeter of damage, durometer on these nice and high. So in terms of an outdoor shoe, for, you know, step out of box performance as well as durability on a drop-in, I mean, this is, you know, where it is at. I mean, these give a lot more protection, a lot better of a performance on those outdoor courts. So if you're looking for that, this is definitely where to go. On indoor courts though, like I said, just get ready for a little bit of warming. And just taking a quick look at the speed ratio of the 808 Ultras, comes in at a 2.49, which I think is pretty representative of these. They get off the blocks lightning quick. Once they warm up, they turn and they cut really quick as well. And like I said, for a shoe that is over 16 ounces for a drop-in on a men's sized 11, they don't feel like they're that heavy. They are definitely giving a lot back in terms of kickback, especially with, you know, the plastic frame around them. Like I said, the carbon fiber is pretty thin on these, but I think it's more to do with the drop-in and midsole that's doing that. So more of a tightly tuned suspension on these. And for a shoe that looks like it is very fast, when you take it out of the box, the performance definitely lives up to that. But getting into what is definitely going to opt people in or out of the 808 Ultras is their fit. Now, the thing is that it's so low profile of a shoe in the forefoot that if you have a really high arch, bunion, tailor's bunion, you know, hammer toe, really anything that causes any lump or bump, these are gonna have, you're gonna have a hard time fitting these. I had a really hard time with my high arch, kind of right in the distal lace line of these. Now that also has some implications on width, because if you have a little bit of a wider foot, unless you have a very low arch, wider foot, that bulk's gotta go somewhere, right? So it's just not as accommodating. So narrow, medium foot, go true to size. I think if you are a 2E though, I probably would just be going up a half size just to get the room in the toe box in terms of just more material down there. If you are a higher arched foot at a 2E or a 4E, this might be a mismatch. Maybe we'll just wait for the 808 just the standard version. That might be a little bit different. I haven't really gotten too much reps in that yet, so we'll see. If that video is already out, hello from the past. But we'll kind of see. In terms of snake bites on your foot, in terms of heel pain, awesome. Arch pain, especially for a drop-in, you know, you wouldn't think, but they're awesome. Ball of foot pain, if your arch isn't too high, they're fine, because the drop-in is so forgiving under there. It's just, if you're trying to cram into this shoe, it's gonna hurt more. So definitely with these thinner socks, like I said, because the uppers are so containing, so good for side-to-side cutting, like I said, they just don't break in like some other drop-ins, previous drop-in Wade shoes do. So just remember, you're trading a little bit of that plush comfort for more performance. But getting into the most interesting part of the 808 Ultras, their playability, because they really are kind of a Jekyll and Hyde when you first take them out versus a little bit later. Like I said, I noticed 5 to 10 minutes in these, I was not getting the gripping power, I was not getting the cutting power that I had in the 808 2 Ultra V2s, which right out of the box, you were just screeching on court. You were cutting so hard in them. You could really trust them doing anything. With the 3 Ultras, I noticed that for a little bit, I just was not having the confidence underfoot. Now, as soon as the rubber warmed up, that went away and they started playing like a traditional 808 shoe would. I did notice on these, it was so much easier to get up off the ground in these versus previous 808 shoes. They got off the blocks a lot quicker than other Wade 808 shoes. They're just a much more tuned shoe in terms of diving board effect, launch, you know, trying to get up into the air. The ground assault capabilities just weren't up to the level of the launch capabilities. Like I said, the more you warm the rubber up, the better it gets. It's just, it was an odd experience because I was used to having that real intimate contact with the ground like the 808-2s had, like my feet just feel like my toes feel like they were touching the hardwood. In these, because there is that plastic layer underneath of the drop-in, there is a little bit of a, you know, a barrier between your toes and the ground. So like I said, these play more like, I would say, the 10s, like the Way of Wade 10s do, versus they play like the 808-2 Ultras. So if you're looking for a drop-in that's got more of the containment and the rugged performance of like the Fission 8 or the 10, then you are going to absolutely love these. If you're looking for something that was like the 808-2 Ultra, the Ultra V2, then I think maybe get the 808-2 line. Just a little bit of a different experience. Not better, not worse, it just, for me, it was just a little bit different. Definitely a super fun shoe to play in again, and it was really surprising because when you have it in hand, they feel a little heavy, but then once you get them on court, they don't feel like anything at all. They feel like feathers just because of all they're giving back to you in terms of launch. So like I said, I would love to hear your thoughts on these, especially because it's like a drop-in shoe that almost like a big center could wear. It's just a really interesting type shoe. So I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. And like I said, I will be getting into the 808-3, the standard version as well. So we'll be getting a performance review of that coming up real soon. And like I said, if you've already seen it, hello. And if you do want to see what I'm talking about with the 808-2 Ultra V2, I will leave that video linked up above, and make sure you subscribe down below. I love this pattern on this shoe. I don't think it's much better. Respect, rubber, and foam. I'll see you somewhere in the Sneakerverse.